Right. So I've had some people um, react to the last video, and I thought I'd make another one. Now, one of the comments that I heard a couple of times was, "Oh well, if you say that people that think Bergoglio's the Pope are not Catholics, you're insulting a bunch of people, and if you want Catholics to listen, you shouldn't say that and that sort of thing." Well, that's just stupid. I mean, let's say, what if I told you I was a basketball player? I'm a basketball player. But then, when I go on the court, I kick the ball, I, play as if I'm playing football. I don't know that I have to throw the ball into the net at the top. I'm looking for the goals. I call offsides. It's like, well, that's not basketball. If you're a basketball player, you should know the rules of basketball. You want to call yourself a Catholic, then you should understand what the Catholic Church has taught since the beginning. Some of these things haven't changed. Now, here's the thing: most Christians, regardless of denomination, most people who call themselves Christians, are no such thing. They're churchians. Churchians are not Christians. Churchians are some kind of masquerading, half lethargic, mostly ignorant, lazy people. They're not Christians. You've got so-called Christians that don't know basic fundamental things about Christianity. And this has happened more than once. I've met so-called Christians, even when I wasn't a Christian yet, telling me that, oh, they've been Christian for 20 years. And then in conversation, I'd come up with like, well, we're under the dominion of Satan. I'd be like, what do you mean? No, we're not. I was like, oh, I thought you're a Christian. Do you even read your Bible? Do you open it at all? I mean, until relatively recently, I wasn't certainly, and even now, I'm not exactly a Bible scholar of note. And yet, the fact that our reality is under the dominion of the enemy is a fundamental Christian concept. I mean, without that, a whole bunch of things don't make sense otherwise. And yet, a lot of so-called Christians don't know it. Now, you want to call yourself a Catholic and you don't know the basic things about the Catholic Church. You don't understand why Vatican II documents are completely heretical. You haven't bothered to even find out. Well, then why do you think you're Catholic? I mean, I can say whatever I want. I can say that I'm a Shintoist Buddhist monk, but that doesn't make it true, especially if I don't know the first thing about Buddhism or being a monk or, all the other things that go with it. So, no, I mean, it's not for me to try not to upset people who can't be bothered to find out the most basic things about what they say is a central part of their life. And then there's another aspect, there's the ignorant churchians. That's one problem. I mean, most people have not read this, okay? Most people, there's 3 books that are worthwhile. Now, most people have definitely not read this, right? But this has got all the rules of the Catholic Church from year 0 or, year 33 or so till 1917. And this is still valid. This is the only valid set of compilation of all the rules of the Catholic Church. So if you're going to believe this stuff, if you're going to say that you're Catholic or whatever, this is pretty much your go-to document for the rules. Yeah. Then you've got another document that you sort of think, well, what makes a Catholic then? Again, a simplified sort of version of thing. Catechism of the Council of Trent. There's other books on catechism, but again, because we haven't had a legitimate pope or legitimate clerics mostly since 1958 on, you should really look at books that have been published before 1958 if you're going to use those as the basis. And here's another brilliant book. This is for Christianity in general, okay? You can't see a title there because it's one of those older books and obviously the cover has been lost. Now, I picked this up on a whim. That's the title. The Crusades, Iron Men and Saints by Harold Lamb. And you can tell it's a pretty old book. I mean, this edition was done in, I think, I can't remember if it's 1930s or 1940s. But so this is first edition, 1930. Now the guy who wrote this must have been some kind of a freak, because he researched it with original documents, both from the Islamic side in Arabic and documents from the Christian side. But if you read that, you find out what the first crusade was really about. And it certainly is refreshing, because if, like most people, I grew up with the idea that, these crusaders were fanatic zealots, going out there to murder the poor, innocent Middle Eastern people. And of course, had nothing to do with reality. The reality is that Islam didn't exist until about 700 AD. And then when it came about, it took over by the sword. I mean, they killed and enslaved millions of Christians. Christianity was throughout the Middle East and throughout the world at that point. And Islam overtook it by force of violence, raping, pillaging, kidnapping, enslaving, and murdering the Christians that used to live there. And they did so very effectively, in hundreds of attacks, hundreds of unprovoked battles against Christians, with the capturing of millions, or literally, the estimates are it's at least 1 million and probably more, of women and children that were enslaved, men killed, and so on. So the first crusade was really just the first response. The first response. Urban II, who was Pope at the time, made a speech in what is current-day France, and that's where the phrase Deus vult comes from. God wills it, or God's will. And I have some objections to using God's name when you're doing violent things. You shouldn't act as though you are acting for God, because you don't know. We're just humans. So if you're going to do some violent thing, first of all, you're doing it. It's your choice, your responsibility, not God's. The way I think of Deus vult is slightly different. I think of Deus vult as in God's will be done, regardless of what we do. So you might murder and kill people thinking that you're doing the best for God, and you're wrong. Or you could be doing it and God forgives you because of other things, That is the way I would say it's God's will. But anyway, if you read this sort of books, and if you understand what it is that being a Catholic is about, there's absolutely no way that you can look at the history of the Catholic Church and Christianity in general, really, because the Catholic Church is Christianity. For the first 1,000 years, there was only one church. There wasn't 2, 3, 10 churches. That was it. There was just one church. And then the differences that appeared between the Eastern Church, or what is now known as the Orthodox, and the Catholics, came about. And this, there's another book up here which is really interesting. It's a very well written book, and it's written by a Protestant, by the way. But there you go. It's a very interesting book, because it goes through every pope. And I mean, some of these guys were just, they make pirates look meek. They had everything. They had really the most vicious scum of the earth, some of these popes. There was one pope that I think he was genuinely probably the best pope ever, and he was a hermit, and he didn't want to have anything to do with the papacy, and they forced him to become pope, and he ran away into the mountains, a couple of times whenever he could. So there's some really interesting history. It's really well written. Generally speaking, the guy who wrote it is very fair. He's just got a couple of in the first 10 pages. I'm not going to spoil it for you. If you get the book, it's funny. In the first 10 pages, he comes up with this theory where he's basically saying, what he is or isn't for, and he completely invalidates his own theory by page 10. And I don't think he realizes he's done that, but it's quite funny. The other thing is, he keeps referring to the Crusades as being a bad thing, like these poor evil, these evil guys that went to kill the poor, weak Middle Eastern guys, and that's absolute rubbish, nonsense. But there's a lot of things like that in the history of Christianity, because we are being attacked. We have been attacked since the beginning, and we're attacked with lies, and they tell you these lies when you're a little kid at school, and you don't know any better, so you just accept it as well. You know, these people are trying to tell me the truth, and most of the people that tell you these lies believe these lies. You know, they don't know any better. But the thing is, they are lies. And the thing is, if you believe them and you think that that makes you a Catholic, you're wrong. Now, whether you're wrong because you're ignorant and lazy and you just haven't bothered to figure it out, or whether you're wrong because you can't emotionally handle the fact that, oh, well, but what does that leave me? You know, if all the popes since 1958 have been fake popes, and all the priests that recognize those popes as being real popes are themselves therefore heretics and therefore also fake popes, do we have even any priests left? Yeah, we have a few of them. There are the priests that understand all of this and realize all of this. I talk about them a bit in a book that's coming out soon. But so again, you know, if you're one of these Catholics in inverted commas that gets offended when I tell you that you're not really a Catholic if you believe in Vatican II and if you think that Bergoglio is the Pope, I mean, that's ridiculous. Bergoglio, and I'm going to do a separate video on him just because it's about time, you know, and I'm going to have to do a bit of research because there's just so much wrongness with this guy. It just goes on and on and on and on. You know, but in summary, Bergoglio is an absolute pedophile protector. He has protected and covered up for pedophiles throughout his career, okay? This guy has destroyed and is continuing to destroy whatever was left of the Catholic Church as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. He has caused more damage to the old real Catholic Church than all the other fake popes put together, really. This guy is a piece of work, and really, you know, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. If you are a Catholic and you believe that you're a Catholic, right? And you go and look at what Bergoglio has done and who is protected and who is put in positions of power, then you have to ask yourself, if God is real, you know, if you believe God, Jesus is our Lord and so on, would he really put this sick fuck, yeah, this guy who protects pedophiles as the head of his church? Really? Really? You think that's what Jesus does? And you have to pay, you have to be, you know, subservient to this sick old bastard? No. No, that's not right. And that's not how God works. And that's not how Jesus works. No. Now you say, oh, well, but would God allow us to be fooled? Yes, God does allow us to be fooled because it's your choice. It's up to you whether you wake up, spend 60, 70 bucks, whatever it is, go buy this, read Canon 188.4, figure it out. Go and see the links that I put on the previous videos for the heresies of the Vatican II documents. Read them. I mean, what does that take you, 10 minutes? And if you don't, it's on you. Besides, it's in the Bible as well. It's in the Bible, right? Like when it talks about how basically God gives them over to their own insanity so that they become twisted and sick. You want to become twisted and sick, God's going to let you. You want to ignore reality, God's going to let you. That's what free will is. Free will comes with responsibility. It's up to you to figure it out. So if you get all upset because I'm telling you you're not a Catholic, or you haven't bothered to figure out about Canon 188.4, and you don't want to know about it, or it hurts your feelings, or you can't handle the fact that, oh, maybe there isn't any real priests left, well, that's on you. It's not my problem. It's your problem. Face reality. Deal with it. And if you want a good, I'm going to put a link to a website that I think does a really decent job of explaining things, and it links to other websites as well, including the heresies of the 16 documents of Vatican II. So this was basically just a quick primer to let you know, those of you that think it's offensive for me to say that most Catholics are not Christian at all, not Catholic at all. Well, don't worry. I haven't even started to have a go at the Protestants yet, and you're going to enjoy those. Most so-called Christians are not Christian. They're just churchians. They're just go along with it to get along type of thing. You know who was Christian? The guys from the First Crusade. Some of those guys sold all their possessions and with their families started walking toward Jerusalem and killing heathens to free Jerusalem. Now that's a Christian. Yeah, that guy believed. you know, the guy that said, oh, I can't really get up on Sunday, I'm a bit tired, I don't want to go to Mass, you know. Yeah, that's not really what being a Christian's about. So anyway, I think that'll do for the next load of hate mail.